yeah, there's that.
I'm still not over the fact that you did not think hypothesizing was a word. Brad, you write for a living.
Nobody's perfect. In the words of a philosopher named Hannah Montana.
I'm so glad that happened.
Yeah.
That's our cold open.
That's got to be it.
That's got to be it.
Yeah.
Okay, Jasmine Crockett.
And we should say that's the cold open in the cold open.
Great.
Yeah.
So this is the cold open.
Welcome to the cold open.
Oh, brother.
And we're back with the second episode of Smoke-Filled Room Podcast. I am Brad Johnson, senior reporter here at the Texan, along with my esteemed senior editor,
That's so
McKenzie,
nice.
DiLullo, not Taylor.
That is me.
And we are here to talk about Texas politics, as is the prompt for this general podcast. I don't know why that's so funny.
Whenever you do intros, it just makes me laugh. I don't know why. You do a great job at them.
Oh, thanks.
But it just seems...
The laughing really gives me.
You do such a good job. You really do.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, a very good job. What are we doing today, Bradley?
We are
I'm
doing
excited for this.
an NFL draft style draft of state offices.
Didn't we do this is so random. We did a fantasy league at the Texan many years
that
back,
was such
didn't
a
we?
waste. Nobody set their lineups.
Nobody cared.
Except for me, and then I didn't win. And
Who won?
I think it was Sarah.
Oh my god.
I think Sarah won, and she just hit auto select, which is the best way to do it. But yeah, there was not a second round of the Texan Fantasy Football League.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's not great. I always start with these fantasy leagues and think I'm going to really invest time in them, and I very rarely do. I'm in a Formula One fantasy league right now, and it's been...
how does that work?
It's the most invested I've been in a fantasy league in a very long time.
Okay. How does that work?
Oh, but my lineup isn't complete. I'm in 8th position, so maybe I'm not doing that well. But regardless, I'm in a fantasy league for... Oh my gosh, I have to... Oh, we're fine. It's totally fine.
So you just pick drivers
You
and
pick
you
drivers.
get points based on their...
Yes.
Okay.
So you
That's easy
get
enough.
5 drivers, and then you have a constructor. So you pick a team. You pick one team that earns you points every week. And you pick 5 drivers. And you have a budget. So you have like $100 million. And they assign
How much
values
does
to
Max
each of the drivers.
Verstappen cost?
I'm just proud you know who that is. Let me look. Max costs...
This is riveting content, by the way.
$27.7 million. He's down $2 million from last week.
Oh, so you buy each week?
You
With a
sign
budget.
contracts as you do in actual Formula One. So you get like a 3-week contract.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's strange.
Anyways, what are we doing in this podcast?
The premise for this podcast is we are doing this in early April, the beginning of April.
Yes.
This is the month of the NFL draft. And
Correct.
so I had an idea. What if we did a draft for statewide officials when the logjam breaks at the top? And the thinking I had behind it was, let's say, for the sake of argument, this isn't going to happen, but let's say that Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Attorney General Paxton, and Ag Commissioner Miller all get appointments in the Trump administration, thus breaking the dam.
Assuming Trump wins in November.
Right. Thus breaking the dam and setting forth a massive bum rush of all these officials who've been waiting in the wings to try and run for higher office.
Ambition and positioning, yes.
To then flood all over for these 4 positions. So we limited it to 4 positions. Obviously you have the U.S. Senate race in 26 as well that people are keeping an eye on. We don't know if Senator Cornyn's going to run. It also looks, at least at the moment, based on Brisket Gate that just happened, that Attorney General Paxton is rearing to challenge John Cornyn for Senate. So we're just going to assume that happens. We're going to assume all of these officials are out of the picture in terms of running for these positions, governor, lieutenant governor. Attorney General and Ag Commish.
So this is the most hypothetical of hypotheticals.
Right.
This is mainly just us having fun.
Right. And then you throw in the fact that, let's say, Abbott and Patrick both leave, then I believe the president of the Senate becomes the governor. And
we're taking that out of consideration.
If that's not the case, then it's the Speaker of the House, this whole line of succession that complicates things. So we're just acting as if that doesn't exist.
So what we're doing is saying, okay, if all these positions were to be open in the next election cycle, who do we think likely candidates would be? So not who would be best suited, not who would be, who we think would do well in that office or have credentials, yada, yada. It's who we think is most likely to enter to run for those positions.
And that dovetails a bit with who is most credentialed,
for
right?
Sure.
Because that will sort itself out a bit. But overall, we're just picking those who we think would jump in, and we're going with 3 candidates each between each of us for each of these races.
And the rules are, if Brad chooses candidate A for a position, I cannot choose that candidate for that position either. But in the next office that we talk about, I can choose the candidate you chose for the previous one, but you cannot choose one you've already chosen.
Yeah, correct. And then at the end, we will guess what the 2027 statewide slate looks like for Republicans.
Yes.
We're talking about Republicans here. Republicans have controlled these seats for 30 years now. Democrats have not been able to, and the closest they got to a statewide was Beto in 18. And so we're just kind of, assuming that right now it's Republicans to lose each of these positions. And so we're just going to focus there. We'll talk about Democrats, candidates to watch for down the road in a bit, but
we'll do some honorable mentions.
Yeah.
Where we talk about maybe some Republicans who didn't make our lineups, but who we think have political ambition or positioning that could be beneficial to them if they did want to run for statewide office further on. And then we'll also talk about Democrats and who we think the rising stars in the Democratic Party are right now.
Yep. Well, I guess with that, unless you have any questions, do I need to clear anything up?
I will say Brad made a little docket for us on our pod, and I went through and started filling it out. And Brad was like, don't show me your hand. Anyway. Also, I will say...
that defeats the purpose of a draft.
I know. I wasn't thinking. I was just trying to get work done. I was trying to get things done, and I didn't think about it.
Okay.
Trying to get it off my plate. It was the wrong thing to do. Also, Brad's excited about the governor portion, and I'm more excited about the lieutenant governor portion.
I mean, I'm excited for it all. I just don't understand how you had trouble coming up with
I didn't have trouble.
Candidates.
I didn't have trouble as much as I just had like a litany of folks I thought were vying for the lieutenant governorship already. And the lieutenant governor has said he's going to run for re-election. So is the governor. Totally. So this is all just saying
the odds of this happening are slim to none. This is just pie in the sky.
Totally.
Very.
But I just had a lot of folks come to mind for lieutenant governor.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose with that we'll get started. So, ladies first. Who's your number one pick for governor?
Okay. And this is in light of the fact that we are not talking about the U.S. Senate race and potential candidates for that.
Right.
I think this person would be a very likely candidate to run for U.S. Senate if Cornyn was not to run again. But I'm picking Crenshaw. And
he was on mine as well.
Yeah, I'm picking Crenshaw. Current congressman, very high profile on the national scene as well as here in Texas. He's got SNL appearances. He's been on any giant podcast, you name Rogan, whoever it is, multiple times. Very high profile, and a very different political animal than who we have in the governorship currently. But
also a prolific fundraiser.
Prolific fundraiser. He's always at the top, which is, I think, also notable in that congressional candidates and congressional incumbents do not typically fundraise huge numbers unless they are someone of Crenshaw's ilk. Mm-hmm. It's just not very common. So he's number one for me, is Crenshaw.
Okay.
What do you think about that? He was on your list?
He was on my list, and...
Oh, you already put it in?
Yeah, he's had, he's been talked about for a while for, higher office, whether it's U.S. Senate or somewhere in some statewide in Texas, and he's always on the short list. No doubt he's angling for something. But, with all this, they can angle for something for a while, set the groundwork for a run, but you still have to have the right timing, which is not something you can always control.
And not something every politician is good at judging.
Right. Strike when the iron's hot. Look at Ron DeSantis for president. He was the darling for
the heir
Republicans,
apparent.
yes, and he used his capital to try and take Trump out. And obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but hindsight showed that was a fool's errand, essentially. Yeah. And the former president ran away with it. And so, timing's everything.
Mm-hmm. So. And I do think that Crenshaw, he's primed to run for some higher office, like we're talking about. The congressional districts are districts, and so that only encompasses one portion of the state. But he has a profile that's big enough to warrant a run for any statewide office.
Sure.
So
I also think his star power has kind of faded some, not a lot. Like, he's still a huge profile. But compared to what it was, the man was, the talk of Republican circles for a while. And, as with many things, reputation meets reality at some point.
Totally.
And so, if he's had to take votes that he's gotten flack for in Congress, and particularly on spending bills, but, when Republicans are in power, nobody really cares about spending. Or a few people do.
Yeah.
So,
true.
But so I think there, like with any of these candidates, there'd be hurdles for him that he'd have to overcome. But I think he's got the right bona fides to try and make a run for the governorship.
And if he was angling for a run, we'd see that profile increase as well, right? I think that's a totally different thing. And I think it will be hard to not talk about U.S. Senate potential candidates when we're talking about these lists for more for statewide elected officials on the state level here. But yeah, he came to mind as my number one for now.
Yeah. I think he's also, like you said, firmly in the U.S. Senate discussion. Yeah. Should that open up? I don't think he'd run against John Cornyn, but if that opens up...
Which is where I say the political ilk is so different, because I do think he is, although his branding is different, his votes and his political ideology tends to be more in the Cornyn kind of camp, which would be very interesting to see that dovetail with his brand that also is very ardently game for lambasting Democrats and kind of being the logjam buster when it comes to lambasting Democrats on the national level. So
sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who do you got?
I am going to pick Mays Middleton. When we talk about Greg Abbott, his biggest asset is his fundraising. Middleton has a similar, ability to bring money in, but it's also self-funding. He runs Middleton Oil. He is probably the wealthiest member of the legislature, and I think by a wide margin, probably. He funds a lot of candidates.
Current state senator.
Former House member.
Former just donor to Republican causes.
Kind of a meteoric rise in Republican circles. He's clearly angling for higher office. The question is what? And under this scenario, with Dan Patrick out of the question, Ken Paxton out of the question, I think the lane would open up pretty significantly for Mays Middleton to try his hand at running for governor. And it doesn't hurt that he can self-fund. His name's been floated in relation to the lieutenant governor position along with attorney general.
Yeah, I have him for a different position. Yeah.
Might it be attorney general?
Perhaps, okay, yeah. But I can say that now that you've picked him, because you can't pick him again.
Sure. So whatever he runs for, he's going to be a formidable candidate, if for no other reason than the money aspect.
But I also wonder, too, if a candidate who is such a prolific self-funder would translate into a statewide position in that way, right? Abbott is prolific in his ability to fundraise from everybody and to coalesce donors in a way that a governor in Texas, we haven't seen that before. He's so good at fundraising.
Yeah.
Now, certainly Middleton has the ability to do so as well, but the self-funding part comes into the equation. So how would that translate to a campaign for governor, right? You need a broad coalition of folks willing to donate to you in order for that campaign to be a success, especially when you're following on the coattails of somebody like Greg Abbott.
Yeah. And whenever Abbott's gone, somebody's going to pick up the fundraising infrastructure that he has created, at least in some form. It probably won't be a smooth transition or as simple as just changing the figurehead. but Middleton he does seem to be closer to Abbott, at least in relation to the current climate that is so school choice focused. Middleton actually dumped some of his own money into some of these House races. He targeted Ernest Bales was one that came to mind. I think Clardy as well. Mm-hmm. And so he's no stranger to doling out monetary contributions in order to get people he prefers in certain positions. He backed early on Matt Krause's run for Attorney General in the 22 primary when Paxton was up for re-election.
And Middleton's not a lawyer, correct?
I don't.
That's important to know.
I think he is, yes. I think he graduated law school.
I'll look it up.
So, yeah, I have Mays Middleton as the top candidate there. Crenshaw was also on my list.
He is a lawyer.
I think that's what I'm going to go with. Any thoughts?
I think that's a great choice. I think he's, like, in terms of the rising stars of the Republican, group of Republicans who could potentially take big races. I think he's in there for sure. I have him for a different position, but I definitely see him as somebody that Republicans could coalesce behind pretty solidly. And just his activism in Republican politics for a long time, I think bodes well for him in that regard. He is a state senator, so that is a bigger jump,
True.
To go from state senator to governor. But I think he's primed for some sort of statewide run for sure. I just don't know that would be the most obvious jump from state senator to governor.
Well, it's another jump up, but Dan Patrick went from state senator to lieutenant governor. Now it's an easier transition, right, because it's the same chamber, but it's only one rung below the gubernatorial position. So.
I think it's obvious for senators to run for light gov because they're right. They're very familiar with the
problem
gov.
Is there's going to be a logjam of senators whenever that opens
don't
up,
even get me started. Yeah, exactly.
So, I'm going to go with Mays Middleton.
I like it.
Who's your second pick?
Okay. This is, again, assuming that all of these guys, Patrick, Abbott, Paxton, Miller, all go to D.C., right? So they're not in the conversation here. This might be – I'm curious to see how folks will respond to this and how you'll respond to this. I have as my number 2 Angela Paxton.
Dang it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's who I was going to pick.
And I really just think that comes down to the Paxton's profile in Texas really broadening from an already very powerful spot after the impeachment trial and the acquittal of Attorney General Ken Paxton on all 16 charges of impeachment. So I think that they're primed and ready.
Imagine a 26 primary race that has Angela Paxton running for governor and Ken Paxton running for U.S. Senate.
Yeah. And the reason we talk about Ken Paxton so forwardly as a potential U.S. Senate candidate is because he's talked pretty blatantly.
He's all but said it
about his
explicitly.
Yes.
At least about his
interest.
His consideration.
Yes.
Yeah,
at the very least, his interest.
Who knows if he'll do it, but
specifically to run for against Cornyn and for his seat if Cornyn does end up retiring, which Cornyn's embroiled in already a power position game of chess in D.C.
Oh,
so
yeah, I forgot about that.
We'll have to see how that ends up. I think he'll stick around if that goes well for him for more than just this term. But if not, I think a retirement is very, very possible.
Yeah.
But,
and those two have sparred pretty significantly in the public eye. I think, a month ago or so, Cornyn tweeted something about responding to Paxton, hard to run for office from prison.
Yeah. Right
before the settlement came out about the securities fraud stuff that ended that case. But no love lost, and I mentioned the brisket wars, but those two,
Tell us what you're talking about when you talk about the brisket wars.
Cornyn tweeted a picture of, I heard it was his wife's brisket. I don't know, a plate of brisket essentially, and
like a baking pan of brisket. Yeah,
and it had what looked like barbecue sauce on it, I assume, and. He knew exactly what he was doing when he tweeted it out. So he said, "Let the brisket wars begin again," and he got really good engagement. And,
it was millions at the end of the day,
and that was the purpose of it. And then Paxton tweets a bit later a picture of brisket that he pulled off of Google. It wasn't his, and I could tell because it has a little insignia at the bottom left. He didn't he didn't take that from his phone. So the jury's still out on what Paxton's brisket looks like if you were to cook it. But yes, I mean, it's clear that those two obviously hate each other, and two are primed for a challenge,
totally,
a clash in 26.
Okay, the last Republican convention. So we're nearing the GOP convention, statewide convention. Last time, 2 years ago, what was the drama with Paxton and Cornyn? Do you remember what I'm talking about? Because Cornyn went out on stage, was booed by all the delegates, and then soon thereafter, I believe Paxton took the stage and found opportunity and positioning to go after Cornyn right after, and received unbelievable support for it. But I can't remember what he said. And that was just like, exhibit, F in a long list of.
Well, the reason Cornyn got booed at that moment was there was a gun bill that was being discussed. I forget if it passed.
Yeah, I don't remember.
My gut says it didn't, but Cornyn was one of the lead negotiators on that. And Paxton mentioned that specifically, and that's what everyone was booing him over.
Yeah,
Cornyn
that's
over.
right.
But yeah, in his speech, Paxton essentially said the Attorney General's office is going to sue over this, and I think he named Cornyn, or he said Texas's senior senator, while discussing that.
Yeah, it was
saying it was a horrible bill.
Lightly veiled, if veiled at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So, there's that. Angela Paxton, she was on my list as well. I mean, clearly, her stock is rising, as is her husband's at the moment.
I'm curious if she'd have any interest in it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm curious the behind the scenes of that, but I think she's positioned.
Yeah. Of course, the last contentious race she was in was the one for state senate against Philip Huffines that was bloody.
Yeah.
And there's still clearly not a lot of love lost between those two families. She won the race and has been in the Senate ever since. And obviously, the impeachment from last year rose her profile.
Well, when I'm saying Mays Middleton is just a senator, the jump to governor seems like a little bit of a big jump, even though he has a great profile. I think Angela Paxton departs from that a little bit, in that her, the Paxton name is so prolific in Texas. Yes, she also is, quote unquote, just a state senator, but I think she has a lot more going for her in that regard because of her husband's profile, her profile during impeachment. Like, there's a lot more going on there, and a lot more folks, I think, are familiar with the Paxton name than the Middleton name.
Okay, makes sense. Now I got to scramble and think of another one. Well, I will say, just for the hell of it, Joe Strauss.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I was planning on him for my third as a bit of a dark horse, but...
Where does this come from? Former Texas Speaker of the House,
Yep.
The ire of conservative activists for 5 terms, very notable, and certainly the poster boy for how to coalesce Democrats to secure a speakership in the House. To ensure that he gets the position he wants. So that's where, a dozen or so Republicans broke off from the caucus and sided with Democrats and elected Joe Strauss. So that's what's in the back of every speaker going forward's mind, is that strategy.
Yeah. I think he's remained active. He's not run for anything, but he's remained active in giving fundraising, and he's very involved in the Republican state legislative committee that gave Phelan $750,000. He and Karl Rove are the 2 Texas names on that board. He's remained active, and especially as we see the party fragment in multiple different lanes. Joe Strauss is obviously not a member of the lane that seems to have the inside track right now. That's, the Paxton lane.
And the Abbott lane.
And the Abbott. So Strauss is obviously different, but I think he could see a lane for him in a crowded field, which an open governorship would absolutely create a crowded field.
And he enters into a lot of these conversations when folks are talking about who might run for statewide office if if a shakeup happened.
And I think he said, before, when asked about this, I think it was specifically about U.S. Senate. I'm not planning on it right now, but never say never, essentially. And so he's remained active in giving to Republicans that he deems to be allied with him, incumbents, and particularly those more on the moderate side of the caucus, whichever caucus you're talking about. So, I could see him in a situation like this and let's do it. And maybe, I catch some lightning in a bottle and I'm governor.
Yeah.
So.
You never know.
Thoughts?
That's a surprising choice. And I think
Well, you took two of mine, so I had to come up with something else.
I also, Brad, for the record, was arguing that you should go first in the governor
That's true.
draft. So.
And I still would have had Mays Middleton because you didn't have him.
So you're tiny violin. This is me.
So, yeah.
Yes. But no, I think that he is, again, like I said, he's been in the conversation whenever there's conversation about a statewide elected shakeup. I'd be surprised if he ran for governor. I've heard a lot about Congress, U.S. Senate, more federal positions. Mm-hmm. I would just be surprised to see him run for governor. But who knows? Yeah. Prominent and interesting choice.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay.
Number 3 for me, this is might be a little bit out of left field, but I do think this is somebody who currently holds statewide office, who would be open to and excited about holding a more prominent statewide office, Dawn Buckingham. Mm-hmm. I think she could hold or enter into a race along these lines, and I didn't see an obvious spot for her in another statewide office where or I just had candidates I was more excited about for the other ones in terms of their likelihood for running. But I think she definitely is in the conversation of somebody who might run for a different statewide office that has a little bit more high profile. Currently, she is the Texas Land Commissioner. She succeeded George P. Bush when he ran for Attorney General against Ken Paxton and took Paxton to a runoff that seems like ages ago. But she secured that position. Before that, she was a state senator. So yeah, we'll certainly keep an eye on that. But
okay.
She's in the conversation for me.
She's definitely looking for higher office. Question is what, obviously.
Yeah.
But, she ran away with the land commissioner race. Was she pushed to a runoff or did she avoid a runoff? I think she was pushed to a runoff.
Okay.
Yeah. But she almost avoided a runoff and then won the runoff pretty easily. So, I think that's a good pick. And especially in the context of this, I can see her, seeing that there's no clear front runner here, mm-hmm. and so why not try it?
She was pushed to a runoff with Tim Wesley, who had 14.8% of the vote. Right. So she had 42%.
Okay.
In a crowded field, but she was by far the leader in that pack.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's more. I'm saying I think she's likely to run for statewide office. What statewide office? I don't know, but I'm putting her here because I don't have a spot for her in another category.
Okay. Well, what do we think of the field here? Who's the front runner?
Wait, who's your third pick?
Oh, duh! I have it written down.
I was like, I see it here.
I'm gonna go with Pat Fallon, another out of left field congressman. He almost ran for state senate to take his old seat back, right? When Senator Drew Springer announced he wouldn't be running for re-election. But reneged at the last moment, decided to stay in Congress. I think it's clear he wants to move back to Texas. He's flirted with running for statewide office before. He announced an exploratory committee to consider the possibility of running against John Cornyn in 20. Decided not to do that. So
a lot of back and forths with Fallon in terms of seeking higher office.
Yeah.
Or other office, not just higher.
And I think he's fairly wealthy, not Mays Middleton wealthy where he's going to self-fund his campaign, but he can put some money in if he wants. I kind of see a lane here for him if this shakes out as it is. Also, I just needed a third because you took two of my candidates. So.
I don't see him as much of an obvious spot for governor. I see him more going for some sort of federal office. But who knows?
Then why did he want to run for state senate?
I don't know. It's interesting.
I think you're discounting the importance of that.
No, you're probably right. I do. Yeah, there's a lot going on behind the scenes with that decision that we don't necessarily know. But I think him running for governor would be, obviously the governor of Texas is a huge, prestigious, unbelievable position, like the envy of governors across the country in terms of what they control and what they have influence over. So I'm not negating that at all. It would just be very interesting to see Pat Fallon run for governor. But who knows?
Okay.
Lieutenant Governor, are we ready for this?
Well, let me ask you the question that I asked
sorry,
prematurely.
yes.
Who do you think's the front runner for this field we've got?
I think Crenshaw. Yeah. Without consideration of the U.S. Senate spot.
Okay.
What do you think?
I'm going to go with my number one pick, Middleton. He's a fast riser in politics right now, and there's a reason I picked him number one.
Yeah.
And in this scenario, I see him...
I see him performing very well in a Republican primary too.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
I mean, I don't think he has drawn the ire of many folks in Republican primary voters like a Crenshaw might have, or other candidates on our list.
Yeah, and obviously Crenshaw has a bigger profile nationally, but Middleton has his own profile in the state, and with that amount of money, you can go a long way.
You can get it done.
Yes.
Yeah. And I do think there is something to be said for somebody who is elected to some sort of state-level office running for governor. They're spending time in Texas. So whether it be the lobby that they're familiarizing themselves with, the legislature that they're very involved with, it's totally different than somebody coming back from D.C. and saying, hey, I'm going to enter into state politics now.
Yeah. The other factor to note here is that Middleton is a pretty big donor to Donald Trump. And if in 26 Trump is still a factor, giving out his endorsements, which we saw what that did in this primary, flipped races on its head. And he would be, probably him and Angela Paxton would be the two vying for the Trump endorsement in this field. And I think I'd give the edge to Middleton on that, on getting that. And if that happens...
Oh, really? I would totally give it to Angela Paxton in that regard. Oh, yeah, totally.
I mean, I've seen multiple pictures of Middleton at Mar-a-Lago, or at least at a Trump event with the president, not just standing in the crowd.
Totally.
I don't know. I could see him have the inside track on that, but...
Interesting.
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
And I'm sure the Trump endorsements effect is not going to go away entirely in 2 years.
And we are getting way over our skis in that regard. But,
right. But
it's
in this
still
scenario, he is the president, right? So
yeah.
Sitting president endorses you for governor, that's going to carry you a long way.
Yeah.
Whether it goes to Middleton or Paxton.
It's true. It's very true.
All right. Ready to go to Lieutenant Governor?
I have never been more ready.
All right.
And you're leading off on this one.
I am.
Much to my chagrin.
And I am going with Glenn Hager.
Oh, good one. Okay.
Comptroller Glenn Hager. He is not seeking a fourth term for comptroller. He said that publicly, and he's basically all but said he's going to run for something else. And, there's only a few spots above that. Attorney General, he's not an attorney. He has no interest in being an attorney. Lieutenant Governor, he used to serve in the Senate or governor. And so I see him with his $9 million war chest that he has built up very quietly, which is very notable. It's not Abbott levels of fundraising, but that's pretty good.
Also for comptroller, which is such a low profile, down low position, at least in terms of how Hager's operated in that office.
Yeah.
To have that sizable of a war chest is interesting. And of course he is the, top finance guy in Texas, right? So that does warrant some conversation about money, but it's still very notable.
It'll also be interesting to see, let's say he did win. I don't think he'd run the chamber exactly the same way as Dan Patrick has. I don't think it's ever going back to where it was because, individuals have seen how powerful the lieutenant governor position can be and is, especially as utilized by the current lieutenant governor. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it'll go back all the way to, kind of a weak LG position. or weaker than it is, certainly, where, the senators control more or are on the front foot of the decision-making more than the lieutenant governor is. But, I see him being a bit more hands-off, but, he's gunning for something. And under this scenario, I see lieutenant governor.
Fascinating. He was on my list.
Yes,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So there you go.
Gotcha on one.
He was further down. I did not have him at number 1, but he was on my list regardless. No, I think that's a really good choice. I think it's a conversation a lot of folks have in Austin, that he is open to running for a position like this. I don't think it would be surprising to see him enter a race. I think you're totally right that he's positioned really well for something like this. So, yeah, Hager's a great choice.
Okay.
My number 1, I'm going to go with Brian Hughes.
Oh, okay.
Is that surprising to you?
No.
Oh, okay.
I've got him for something else.
Oh, okay. Got you.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think that he, as somebody that the lieutenant governor or the current lieutenant governor trusts very highly to carry and ferry through big pieces of legislation, when you see a lot of bills make their way through the Senate that require a lot of debate, marathon hearings, I think Hughes is somebody that the lieutenant governor often tasks with those responsibilities, or who is trusted by the caucus to run those things through. He's a great orator. He knows what he's doing. He's very deferential to his colleagues. I think he's positioned himself as a very just amenable voice in the Senate to conversations that are difficult, potentially about social issues, whatever it is. And I think he definitely has political ambition for higher office.
No doubt.
Former House member, has been in the Senate for a while, and certainly avoids situations where he could find himself within the ire of some sects of the party.
Yeah.
So I think he is certainly somebody that we could see running for lieutenant governor. And that's where I also want to talk about, it is obvious to me that, yes, Hager is definitely in this conversation, but I do think that the fast track to lieutenant governor often begins in the Senate with the senators.
Hager was a senator. That's
back in the day.
The counter, I'd say. Yeah.
Very true.
It wasn't that long ago.
But that even holds, right? He's a part of this conversation. I think folks who are interested in the lieutenant governorship have spent time in the Senate. And I think Hughes is one of those in the Senate currently that would receive support from a lot of folks in the chamber.
Including, perhaps most notably, Dan Patrick.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
And,
depending on who gets in, right?
But
I think
been a lot of talk
in the conversation.
Behind the scenes about what does a field for lieutenant governor in a Patrickless Senate look like. And, a few names come up constantly as potential successors, and those favored by Patrick to be successors. And, maybe there's one he has in mind that he's keeping very close to his chest. But, the ones we're hearing are, Middleton, Brian Hughes is in there as well. My next pick, Brandon Creighton, is in there. Yeah, he's next. So, I could see Hughes being certainly among that, and personally, I think he has his eye more on Attorney General, which we'll get there.
Yeah.
Since you can't steal that pick from me now. But yeah, absolutely, he's definitely in the discussion.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Creighton for you.
Creighton.
Yeah.
Similarly to Hughes, he has taken on a lot of heavy issues, less on the social issue side and more on education. Creighton carried the school choice plans for the Senate.
I believe he's the chairman of both the Education and the Higher Education Committee in the Senate.
Yep.
Yeah.
He has managed to buck the lieutenant governor on some big issues without, for lack of a better word, pissing him off. The one that comes to mind is the electricity repricing. Back in 21, after the blackouts, there was a bill that was kind of like a hot potato. Lieutenant governor wanted it, and the Senate wanted it, or at least most of the Senate did. The House didn't. It ultimately died. It would have repriced the market during a window, the electricity market during a window during the blackouts. It didn't go through. Frankly, I believe that was the onus for the devolving relationship between the lieutenant governor and the speaker. A lot has happened since then, obviously, to really rev that up, but
that was their first major public conflict.
Yeah, by my eye, that's the one. But in that, Brandon Creighton, he voted against the repricing bill. Yet he's still a chairman. He managed to toe that line well, whereas someone like Kelly Hancock, who at the time also was the Business and Commerce chair, which handled electricity. So it wasn't like they were on equal levels of stature in terms of this issue.
For sure.
This is Hancock's issue. And he believed firmly that the repricing was the wrong way to go about this. And he supported securitization. He won that round. That's what the legislature ultimately did. That's what the House preferred. But Creighton, where Hancock got stripped of his committee chairmanship after that, Creighton is still, one of the boys for the lieutenant governor, and he's a skilled politician, and he's managed to find his way through these fractures, these fissures, and without coming out pretty unscathed, I'd say, and definitely wants higher office, absolutely, and I think he would jump at the opportunity to run for lieutenant governor.
Yeah, I agree. He's on my list. I totally agree. I think he's definitely in the conversation, and I pair him with somebody like Hughes in that regard as a current senator who has goodwill with the current lieutenant governor and the chamber, specifically the Republicans in the chamber, to position himself for something like that. And as a reminder, too, when I say position themselves with the folks in the chamber, the lieutenant governor is elected by the people of Texas. It's a statewide elected position. So how much influence the senators have is, minimal in that regard. But this is somebody who would come in and run the Senate. And I think it's worth talking about what the other senators might think of somebody who would lead their chamber and especially turn from colleague to leader.
Yeah.
So
also, like you said, they're elected by the statewide voters, but discussions behind the scenes among senators can whittle a field, right? It can encourage or discourage certain candidates from running. And so while it's not the be-all, end-all, it does have an effect, I'd say. And I'd say Creighton is in a good position to do that.
My my second, I guess, because you took two of my guys here off my list. Darn you. But I guess what push comes to shove, it's what I did to you last cycle. Yep. But second, you already mentioned him, Hancock. I'm putting Kelly Hancock in the running here. Okay. I think he is somebody who definitely has considered higher office and would be open to running for something in the future. He is in an entirely different position than Creighton and Hughes, though, for reasons you've explained. He's caught himself in a little bit of the ire of the lieutenant governor, and certainly saw some, after that session, some demotion to different committees and things like that was difficult. But at the same time, he's aligned with a lot of very powerful people within the Republican Party, whether or not they're in the Senate. I mean, he is, for all intents and purposes, been very close with the governor on a lot of different issues and is positioned very well as an ally of Governor Abbott.
Endorsement for either Hughes or Creighton from Patrick. An Abbott endorsement for Hancock would be
huge, unreal,
even bigger.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't think he at all is out of the conversation for lieutenant governor. I think he also could run for something like governor. I think he'd run for other offices, but I do think he's worth talking about for lieutenant governor for all of those reasons. And yeah,
I was going to pick Kelly Hancock second, but I decided not to because I had Hager in the race, and I see them kind of in the same lane.
Yeah.
I think they're both close with the governor, Hancock especially, but I think Hager is too. And I instead decided to go with Creighton because I see Hancock and Hager kind of going for the same lane here. And
that makes sense.
Someone's got to go on that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to pick the guy with the $9 million war chest.
Solid. Who already has been on a statewide ballot multiple times. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, absolutely. Hancock is someone to watch for a number of different positions. And
I think he'd be well supported by a lot of big organizations, some different grassroots organizations. But I think you can say that of any of these Republicans that we're considering for lieutenant governor.
Hey, maybe comptroller is something to watch him for.
Totally.
I think that would be something to note. But he's his political career, I don't think, is done.
Yeah.
I think he's
not stopping at Senate, I don't think.
Right.
Who knows? But that's
though
my
he did
inclination.
What was it? He got a transplant, right? He had a medical procedure.
Oh, yes.
Was it, you remember what?
I don't.
Okay. It was
But
pretty
you're right.
serious, but he seems to be doing a lot better on the mend. And, another factor in this is he voted for impeachment and was very forceful in defending his...
Or on 2 articles, he voted for impeachment.
Right.
Yes.
But he was among the Republicans that voted for impeachment. And, that's, at least right now, not a good look for just the base,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do they care in 2 years? I don't know. I mean, I think there's a strong argument that
We could have
that
a whole
issue
other
fades
podcast about that.
significantly. Yeah.
The memory of Texas voters and how alignments and alliances change in the course of a year, 2 years, 3 years.
I think, you know what? I think we'll put that in our back pocket.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh, interesting.
We certainly haven't already come up with that. But yeah, that'd be interesting to see how that affects things. And, obviously we talked about this in the first episode, which weighed more in GOP voters' minds, school choice or impeachment. I think it's, with $6 million from Abbott behind it and all the other money that came in, I think it's probably safe to say school choice weighed more. But impeachment absolutely was a factor. And the question is, does it have staying power as an issue for voters?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, my third one. I'm going to go with Christy Craddock. Current Texas Railroad Commissioner. I think she's the chairman this year because she's up for re-election, and they stagger it. So when you're up for re-election, you're the chairman of the body, of the agency. So she ran away with her primary. She had, I think, 5 primary challengers.
Another statewide elected official we sometimes forget about because of
Yeah.
the body that she serves on.
Yep. That nobody really knows what it does, or at least few people do.
It's nothing to do with railroads in all reality.
Yeah. So in reality, it's oil and gas. One of, if not the most important industry for the state.
Her father is a former Speaker of the Texas House.
Yep. And she is absolutely angling for something and has been for a while.
Yeah.
She's been biding her time. Her name surfaced in discussions about running for AG against Paxton in 22. Obviously, she didn't do that. But, yeah, I think she would jump at this opportunity, and she'd be formidable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially as in this case, the lone woman in a field full of guys, and
Yeah.
I think she'd be
In the conversation.
Yeah, no doubt.
I totally see that for sure. And you're right. I think there's a strong possibility she runs for some sort of higher office or other statewide office in the years to come. So what that looks like, who knows? I'm going to go with. Let me make sure yes. Okay. You took a few, so I had to make some adjustments here. But I'm going to go with Donna Campbell.
Oh, okay.
I think somebody that would be
no longer the only woman in the race. There we go.
Exactly. I think that she would be very amenable to running for higher office. She is also somebody who served in the Senate, I think, has followed the party line in terms of Dan Patrick's Senate, positioned well in that regard, and I think she would be, in the conversation at least, and open to running for something like this, and has, been part of those conversations in the past.
Yeah, she's someone that we'll see if she gets a bigger committee chairmanship. She's currently nominations chair, and getting a chairmanship period is a big thing for anyone in either chamber of the legislature. But getting a more prestigious one than nominations, I think prestigious. She is definitely, she has her eye on that, and that could springboard her to being among Hughes Creighton.
Yeah.
As potentials for the anointed one by Dan Patrick, if this is how it plays out. So.
And I think it's also worth mentioning in terms of the Senate and the dynamic, Joan Huffman is, very much the right hand of the lieutenant governor. She has not been as much in the conversation of folks who would willingly enter into a statewide race, but she is a very powerful member of the Senate, chairs the Senate Finance Committee.
It's almost like she could fit in an honorable mention.
It's almost, you're right. I'm kind of jumping ahead, aren't I?
Yeah, you are. Getting ahead of yourself.
But I was also going to mention Jane Nelson, the former Senate Finance Chair, who...
Did not think about.
But she's the Secretary of State right now. Yeah. And so I don't know that would be something that she would jump in for another elected position, but in terms of powerful senators who've... Yes, you're right. Why are you making that face?
Thought I was going to get accused of mansplaining again.
Well, no, I was trying to be really nice.
Okay. Fair.
Brother. We can't even have a nice moment.
In this football podcast, I thought I was about to get another,
I could have spiked the football, but I didn't.
Oh, you could have.
But no, you're right. It's not elected. But regardless, she holds statewide office right now. But I don't think she'd be... I don't have her on any of my lists right now. But in terms of powerful senators or former senators, Huffman and Nelson, top of the list.
Man, you just blew right past that honorable mention.
No, I have a whole section of honorable mentions.
All right.
They're not even on my list.
Okay.
Goodness gracious.
Well, who do we think is the front runner in this field?
Probably Hager.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, probably Hager.
I'm just surprised you gave in on my pick and didn't stick with yours.
I think it entirely depends on what office he would opt to run for. And I think lieutenant governor is one he'd be especially excited about.
Yeah.
Just considering his past in the Senate and all that.
Hey, he's got $9 million burning a hole in his wallet. So.
But secondarily to that, I would say Brian Hughes.
Yeah. And money's not everything, right? But it can be raised.
And this is where he can use that fund to run for this office, which is notable as well.
Right. But it is something, especially how big that sum is at the moment.
Yeah, huge.
So, okay. I'm going to say Hager as well, if that's not surprising.
Great.
Okay. Attorney General.
Where do we even begin?
Who do you think is going to sue the Biden administration next?
Make that their job description.
I mean, it basically is.
Is suing the Biden administration as a Republican elected official, state's top lawyer.
The Obama administration.
Yes. But in this case, again, Trump would be in office, so.
That's true. You're right.
But regardless.
So who is going to head up the very neutered office of the... I'm just kidding. Who you got?
Middleton.
Yeah,
right off the bat. So where you have him for governor, I have him for AG. He was supportive of Krause, like you said, when Matt Krause, former state representative, opted to run for AG. He later dropped out. But he... And
Middleton was...
rumored to be in the conversation of running against Paxton for that position then. And just like you said, I think, the self-funding aspect of his candidacy would be huge, especially for a position like Attorney General. I think he has a great position in terms of the primary voter electorate and how they would respond to his candidacy. He has a great record in the Senate for primary voter. I just think he's well positioned for any sort of statewide run.
And that's what we're talking about here, primaries. Right?
Yep,
So
exactly. Yeah, he's my number one.
I think that would be formidable.
Go ahead. Yeah. Notable also that somebody who runs for AG, Middleton, I do believe he is an attorney, but you do not have to be an attorney to run for AG. So I want to make that clear up front as well.
Okay. Well, I have... Who do I go with first?
I'm really curious to see where you go with your picks for AG.
I'm going to go with George P.
Really?
He's going to come back.
You think he's going to come back?
Run for the office that he sought, this time with Paxton out of the picture as it relates to this race. So, he was razor close to getting the Trump endorsement. People forget that.
Yeah.
He was very close.
Which is so crazy to think about in terms of the political landscape now, but he was really close.
Oh, yeah. And, if one or two things went the other way, including the Trump endorsement, he might be, in the office at the moment. He pushed Paxton to a runoff, and then Paxton won the runoff by a wide margin. But, at that point, things had already cascaded in Paxton's favor, and including the Trump endorsement. So, I'm going to say he's going to come back, make a comeback bid. And who knows if he wins, but there's obviously a lane for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been on the ballot for it. He's been on the statewide ballot for years as land commissioner. So, what's another run?
Yeah. It's a good pick. Solid pick.
Okay.
He was on my short list, or my honorable mentions list, but not my AG list.
Okay.
I'm now going to go with somebody that has been in headlines with Paxton many a time, condemning him or asking him, hey, time to resign.
I had him as well.
Chip Roy.
Yep.
Current congressman for Texas's 21st congressional district, former head of Paxton's AG office, and long career in Texas politics, has been in and out of the legal scene here in Texas for many, many years. But I think he specifically has an angle to run for AG. He, as serving as a congressman, is the budget hawk from Texas. I mean, that has kind of been his deal, as he is willing to take bold positions on budgetary issues and other issues as well. But that's really been his bread and butter, garnering him a lot of support from very conservative members of the Republican primary electorate. I also think, too, his profile and history with Paxton would be a very obvious dovetail into running for this office. How that would be received with Republican primary voters is a whole different conversation. But
again, is it something that's even top of mind for them?
But he's called for Paxton to resign, right? Mm-hmm. And he was formerly he was Jeff Mateer's predecessor, if I'm not mistaken. So the top of the AG's
first
office.
Assistant Attorney General.
Yeah, and he left the office and certainly has very little, there's no love lost between those two, Paxton and Roy. But at the same time, Roy has come out, and I forget exactly which legal challenge it was that he came out and applauded the Attorney General on recently. But he was willing to come out and applaud Paxton when he made a move politically or legally that he was in line with. But he has straight up called for Paxton to resign before.
Yeah, Roy is, he's always very logically consistent. I think the strike against him, and this is something he, I'm sure, would readily acknowledge and say, and actually that's a benefit for me, is there's a lot of hills on which he'll die.
Totally.
And
which is also where he garners a lot of respect from folks.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But, candidates that prefer to stay out of the limelight, they think that's kind of foolish to do. And obviously he disagrees and
is willing
Chip Roy
to.
is nothing if not someone that sticks to his guns on stuff. So
sticks to his principles on whatever that might be. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I think that's a good pick. And he was going to be one of my picks until you stole him. So next I'm going to go with Brian Hughes. And so basically for every reason you mentioned him as a lieutenant governor candidate, I think he is that and more with the Attorney General's position. I think this is what he wants more. I think he would rather have that. That's just a hunch based on things I've heard.
Yeah.
He's definitely in the mix for both, but I think if push came to shove, especially if you have Brandon Creighton running for lieutenant governor.
I don't see them readily running against each other.
Yeah, I think you'd have Brian Hughes dip and run for Attorney General.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my pick.
Yeah.
And I'm sticking to it.
Solid. I think that's super solid. Yeah, he was on my list if I didn't choose him for LICA, so absolutely. Third place. This would be fascinating if we had a Roy v. Rinaldi primary. But I do see, if Paxton were to leave the office, Matt Rinaldi, current Texas GOP chairman and former Texas House member, as somebody that the Paxton apparatus would readily get behind, be very supportive of. They're very powerful. There's a lot of money that can be drawn in that regard, but I think Rinaldi would be a big-time part of that conversation. He's also a lawyer, so that's also part of his pedigree. But, yeah, he's been in and around Texas politics for a long time, and I think he would be certainly somebody that they would find amenable to that position.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I was going to say exactly that. But because I can't say that, I will go with State Rep Jeff Leach.
Ooh.
Yep.
Talk about a Yeah, a heel turn there from Rinaldi.
They were, yeah, Leach might run as the anti-Rinaldi candidate.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Yeah.
So, gained a bigger reputation. Some hate him now, others love him now during the impeachment, and he gave one of the closing speeches about advocating for the conviction of Ken Paxton during that impeachment trial. He chairs the Judiciary Committee in Civil Jurisprudence. I think he is thinking about this. I've heard his name pop up a lot when discussing future Attorney General candidates. And if this floodgate opens, how can he say no? And there's discussion about him not seeking re-election for State House this year. He ran and won handily, so obviously there wasn't a ton to that. But these guys are always considering whether it's worth giving it another go. But by running again, Leach preserves his spot in elected office, and I think sets himself up to run in 2 years for Attorney General if that opens up. So, maybe if Paxton for some reason sticks in the position, Leach would be, that would be just a...
That was the most wild primary.
Yes.
A knockdown, drag out.
Yep.
Gosh,
but,
yeah, that'd be tough. No, solid choice.
I had to dip deep into my bag there because you took...
I don't think you dug that deep. I think that makes sense.
No, it's not. I don't think it's a reach. It's just, it's not who I would have gone with at the moment. But, oh well.
I will also
That's why
say,
we have a draft, right?
That's why it's a draft.
That's why you have a big board and you have backups and backups to the backups.
That's why we can prepare.
Backups to the backups.
That's right.
Yep.
I will say also with Rinaldi, notable in that he's the current GOP chairman, state party chairman, and he opted not to run for re-election. And very soon thereafter, Abraham George, former Texas House candidate, ran against Candy Noble, came forward and said, I'm running. Rinaldi, Paxton, that whole apparatus endorsed him within 15 minutes.
But it wasn't coordinated. It was not coordinated.
Not at all.
Spur of the moment.
Totally. Spontaneous. But regardless, I think that's notable to mention as well.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay, who's top for AG?
In this, oh man, that's tough. That's really tough. I don't want to pick Middleton because I already picked him for governor. So I'm going to go with Bush.
Over the rest of the field?
He's been on the ballot before.
He's been on the ballot for a while. Bush is a distant memory in terms of how much has happened since he was on the ballot last. Certainly
That's true,
a prominent
but none of these
name.
other candidates have been on the ballot statewide.
How many op-eds have been written about the Bush name in Texas losing its potency?
Yeah. But in Trump's own words, he's the one Bush that likes me.
Yeah.
So that sets him apart.
It's true.
He's not his father, he's not his uncle in terms of reality in relation to the former and potentially future president who governs a lot in this party right now. But there's also a lot of people that love George P. and the Bush name. They're in the faction of the party that is kind of out of power right now, or at least out of favor with the general direction that the party's going. But he's got his supporters.
Yeah.
And he pushed Paxton to a runoff, a sitting statewide elected official.
Who at the time was very much more at odds with primary voters than he is currently. I think that's worth mentioning, too. I think
he's also not a factor in this, at least by name in this right now.
For sure.
And also, if Jeff Leach is running, which this is a hypothetical scenario, but if this field happens and Jeff Leach is running and Chip Roy is running, do you think if Paxton decides to get involved, he's going to choose to go after Bush over those two? I don't think so.
Yeah, I get that.
I don't think so.
I get it.
So
Middleton's my top pick.
I know.
Yeah,
that's the easy one.
I think he's top pick for AG for sure. I think that goes without saying for me. But yeah, that's who I have.
Okay.
Okay. The crown jewel here.
Yeah, this is gonna get wild.
Yeah.
Crazy, as it were.
Oh, Lord in heaven.
Oh, is that my cue?
No, you just said as it were, and that drives me crazy.
Oh, okay.
Okay, ag commissioner. Let's talk about it. Brad, you're number 1. You get to pick first here with the ag commissioner.
that's
I know
right,
that's like the big, diamond here that we're all going for is the first pick for ag commissioner in this draft. So what do you got?
Comeback bid from Rick Perry. Just kidding. Just kidding. Definitely not. I do have him written down here.
For what?
Wait, no, that's a different Perry.
Oh.
That is Charles Perry. Senator Charles
Interesting.
Perry. I read
That's out of left field. That's out of left field.
So you'll probably take the other one that I was going to say, but this is my legit, not my joke candidate.
Yeah.
But
I will say we had a harder time with ag commish than we did others. It's a little bit tougher.
I think it's wider open, like.
It's not necessarily an office that a ton of people are angling for. It's more an avenue that opens up and people are like, let me think about that.
Yeah.
But
state senator from Lubbock, he's got the bona fides, talks a lot about water infrastructure. That's big in ag, obviously. And I think that's just generally where his policy interest lies more. He's done stuff. He was, I forget which bill he authored, social issue bill this past session that was pretty big. I forget which one exactly. But he's been involved in that. But I think, when I talked to him, he couldn't stop talking about the water situation, which it shouldn't.
Makes sense.
It shouldn't.
Yeah.
Be given short shrift is a huge problem, and we'll see if they can address it at all. But the state's booming population is going to cause a lot of issues for water supply, especially if they can't get their stuff together and build new water supply, which has its own quagmire. If we're building reservations, not reservations.
What are you? Reservoirs?
Reservoirs, thank you. If we're building reservoirs, that land's got to come from somewhere, and there's people's land that's going to be taken. Anyway, I won't digress too much. I think this would be something he'd jump at, especially given the vacancy, and he would be among the higher profile guys probably seeking this, unless there's someone which may well be accurate that I'm just totally skipping over at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like this field was tougher to manufacture and gather candidates for, but that's an interesting pick. He definitely was not on my radar, which I think will be kind of the case for, I think, some of the picks we have. But
okay, who you got?
I have, this is out of left field. I don't think you'll think this person at all.
Oh.
Louis Gohmert.
I had him on, interesting.
Yeah.
I guess I did not have him for this, but I had him among potential candidates for stuff.
For AG?
Former
AG candidate.
I hadn't assigned him a position.
You just had him on the list.
I wrote down a big board
Yeah.
of people, and he was on it. So
former congressman from Texas.
Beloved.
Yeah, beloved
Especially
in East Texas. Oh my gosh.
He won his district of East Texas in the AG's race.
Outside of his district even. It was like East Texas, just East Texas. People love Louis Gohmert in East Texas. Former congressman, he ran for attorney general, lost, didn't make it to into the runoff that George P. and Paxton were engaged in, but he certainly, I think, shored up the support of folks who agreed with Paxton, at least politically, but had concerns about some of the allegations or legal issues that the attorney general is facing. So he is in line with that side of the party, but he was, positioning himself as the alternative who didn't have those issues to contend with. Rural Texas guy. I think he would be an interesting candidate, and I think this could be certainly an office that he would be formidable in running for.
In this scenario so far, it's West Texas versus East Texas.
Check that out.
Huh. That would be quite the spectacle.
It would. Netflix special coming to you 2026.
I like the pick.
Thanks, pal.
I'm mad that I didn't think about it myself. So
I'll take that.
Kudos to you. There you go. Well done.
I'll take it.
My next pick is going to be, I'm going to do this now before he gets taken. I'm going to go with State Representative Briscoe Cain.
Dang it.
Briscoe is the chairman of the Agriculture Committee.
Why is that funny, Bradley?
Well, he's from Deer Park.
A suburb
and a suburb of Houston.
Yeah.
Now, he does have a farm now, which leads me to the reason I actually picked him here. It's not entirely
out of left field.
Humor.
Yeah.
I was listening to the BCM podcast, kind of Austin insider. Charles Blaine's on it, Brad Swale, and Michael Searle, and Briscoe was on it. And he's talking about how he and his wife now have a farm. It's not huge, but they have a farm that they go work at a lot, and they're on it constantly. And he's talking about how interested he is in agriculture at the moment, especially after he got that chairmanship. He used to be elections chair, and then this past, dang it, that was another one I had that you just typed out. Essentially, Representative Kane, I took you at your word on the podcast. Now you've got to back it up by running for ag commissioner. Show the people how transformative you've become.
Does Briscoe have a stock of bolo ties? Why do I feel like I've seen him on the floor?
I think I've seen him with the bolo tie, yeah.
That would fit.
Yeah.
It'd fit the vibe.
That would be an interesting campaign. And he's very intelligent. What he didn't know about ag growing up, I don't know maybe he grew up on a farm, I don't know, but just based on him living in Deer Park, what he didn't know from that about agriculture, I'm sure he is, absorbed in the time he's been ag chair.
And I will say, when you are serving in the legislature, you become much more literate on a variety of issues facing the state than you ever were before you were elected. Like, you are faced with legislation all the time where you have to contend with these questions and issues. And
even if you don't represent a rural area,
you have more knowledge than the average citizen on some issues, not all. Yeah. It's very important to listen to your constituency, but there are a lot of things you're finding out a lot about, having the state's foremost experts walk into your office and teach you about stuff every day. Yeah. Okay, my next one is James White, former state representative. He did run for ag commissioner against Sid Miller the last time, or in 2022. When was that?
Yeah, it was
2022.
Yeah. It wasn't close.
Wasn't
Sid Miller
close.
ran away with it.
And now he serves on a commission here in Texas. He's the
Funeral Services.
Yes, Funeral Services chairman, I believe. But he
executive director, I think it is.
Yes, but he is certainly somebody I think would be on the short list for this position, having run for this position previously, expressed interest in running for it. Really likable guy,
Texas.
easy to chat with.
Yeah, I almost texted him in doing prep for this to see if he would have any interest in that.
I used to get texts.
I'm sure he is.
I used to get texts from him all the time about after he'd listened to our podcast.
Yeah,
it was great. Classic.
Well, James, if you're listening to this,
let us know.
I don't want you to run so you prove McKenzie right, but that would be, you were on my short list
exactly.
too,
it would still prove you right in one way or another.
Okay.
Yeah. Number 3, Bradley.
I am going to go, this is out of left field, I think, but I think it makes sense.
Okay.
Cecil Bell.
He was on my list.
Oh, hey, look at us.
Dang.
Look at us.
Dang. We actually had multiple of the same candidates for this position, even though we thought we wouldn't have.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Longtime member. He's from a rural area.
Wears his cowboy hat.
Which
is a big deal.
Yeah. I think it's a lock for him. Well,
it makes sense.
Him not wanting to run for other office, notwithstanding, because running for a statewide office is a lot, right?
It's a lot.
Especially going from a tiny little district. I'm sure. I don't think it's that tiny, but it's not a whole state.
Geographically speaking.
But I think he's got the bona fides to run for this. And does he have the interest? No idea. But
he made your list. And he made mine as well.
There we go.
He's Cecil Bell.
All right, round it out.
Okay, this is kind of I think a very long shot, so bear with me. I'm picking Doc Anderson. I think he fits the bill. He did retire from the legislature as a House member who's retiring this cycle, but I do think he would be a phenomenal candidate for the position. I think he'd have interest in it. He is a veterinarian from Waco, so I think he would be well primed for a position like this in terms of statewide office. And he's another guy really beloved by a lot of the members in the legislature because he's just a good old boy veterinarian from rural Texas who, takes care of business, wears his hat, shows up to work, and very much just a Texan through and through. So I think he'd be an interesting candidate. Again, no idea if he has any interest. He's kind of in the Cecil Bell. He's even less likely, I think, than Cecil Bell to run for this position, but he's on my list.
Well, he decided not to run for re-election, and the reason he cited was wanting to spend more time with his family. Yeah. And so hard to do that when you're running for statewide office. Now, that is 2 years from now. He may get fidgety, and want to do something else, but I could see it. Absolutely.
Totally. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, he serves on the Agriculture and Livestock. He's the vice chair of the Agriculture and Livestock Committee. He's on the Energy Resources Committee.
Which is just funny having Briscoe Kane as the chair and Doc Anderson as the vice chair.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So funny.
But in this scenario, those two are running against each other for this position.
Yeah. Who's your top candidate? Ag Commish.
It's got to be Gohmert.
Yes, yeah.
It's got to be.
Me too.
I want to say Perry, but
no, Perry's a fun choice.
It's got to be. It's got to be Gohmert.
I think Gohmert fits the bill.
Nobody has the profile.
We got a good field here. I like this field. I'm with you. Yeah, Gohmert for sure for me too. Number one.
Okay, now we're on to honorable mentions that you put the cart before the horse on. Do you want to start with Dems or start with ours?
Let's start with Dems. Let's talk about some Democrats. Again, we're having this conversation about Republicans because
I think we should flip it because we just talked about all these individuals in the Republican primary, and we mentioned honorable mentions already, kind of.
So you want to go with Republicans and
I think we should
depart
get that
from
out of the way
my suggestion?
And then focus on the bigger option. Yes, I think your suggestion was horrible, and you should pay dearly for that.
Okay, fine, Bradley. You know what? And because of your propensity to mansplain to me, I would ask that you go first.
Yeah.
Teach me what I need to know.
Wait, so is the rule we can't pick anyone that's on this list already?
Basically.
Or on our list?
On any, just honorable mentions of folks we've not talked about who are in some way primed for another office.
Joan Huffman and Jane Nelson, I think, are perfect examples that you already mentioned, and then veered off on. I'm going to say Rick Perry.
You're never going to let that go.
No, I'm not. I'm going to say Rick Perry.
Which one?
The Rick Perry, okay? I don't know. I think he's got some fight left in him. Clearly, he's backing the speaker in the runoff, maintaining his profile. Probably he's just done. He's enjoying retirement, and he's picking his battles on.
It's not new, though, that he would engage with the Republican Party primaries.
Right. And,
he's done that for years.
There was rumor that he was thinking about running against Abbott for governor in 22.
Now, obviously, a different Rick Perry.
Yes, a different Rick Perry.
What was our headline? Rick Perry's running for governor, not that one.
Yes.
Or something like that, yeah.
Yes. So, yeah, I'm going to go with him. How about you?
Okay, I think Eric Johnson's a big name to throw into this.
I cannot believe I didn't think about him.
Dallas mayor, former Democrat who switched to the Republican Party. I think he is another candidate that is primed for some sort of federal run for something. I think that would be fascinating. Big city mayor, big Republican mayor at that here in Texas, elected as before he switched parties, but regardless, somebody who I think has a profile that's ready to grow.
Okay.
Do you have others for Republicans?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Todd Staples.
Oh, nice. Tell us about Todd Staples.
Head of Texoga. He used to be, what position did he used to be in?
Why can't I? That is such an obvious.
I know he ran for. He's been around a while, and he was in office.
Texas Commissioner of Agriculture.
Okay, so he ran against Sid Miller, or he was Ag Commish.
He was two-term.
And then he ran for what position?
Lieutenant Governor.
Lieutenant Governor. That's right. Okay, so he's been around the block. He's done it. He's been on the ballot.
Hasn't been on the ballot for a while, but a prominent figure nonetheless.
Yep. But he's maintained his profile in insider circles running Texoga, Texas Oil and Gas Association. I'm sure it's a very comfortable living. And going from that to elected office would be a huge drop down, but ambition, you know, maybe he's got it still, and he's a younger guy. He's not pushing 70, or if he is, he hides it really well. So I'm going to go with Todd Staples.
There you go. I think there are a lot of House members we could have talked about that weren't talked about because it is a bigger jump for a House member to go to some sort of statewide elected office than a senator or something along those lines. I think Nate Schatzline is a member who is primed for some sort of step up, very eloquent, very good on a mic, certainly part of the faction or the conservative faction of the House that is at odds with the Speaker, so that would be difficult in some regards, but is very loved by a lot of grassroots folks around the state. So I think he's certainly somebody, a young guy, young family. I think he has a lot going for him in terms of if he wanted to run for other office. I think he is in that realm. Matt Schaefer is somebody else I think we need to keep an eye on, who retired from House District 6, I want to say, in East Texas, but said he isn't necessarily saying he won't run for other office in the future. I'd keep an eye on him for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Who else you got? Well, I noodle on my list here. Caroline Harris, Caroline Fairley. I think they're in the conversation for sure. Two young Republican women. Caroline Harris just served her first term in the House. Caroline Fairley is set to join the House this next session. So I think those are two other folks to keep an eye on as well.
I think I might add Phil King and Tan Parker, state senators. I don't know what exactly they'd have their eye on. Maybe they just prefer being in the Senate. And they're both freshmen right now, so they're still new at that. But that hasn't stopped people before. And that, Middleton's a freshman.
Yeah.
That won't stop him from running for something.
Totally.
So just looking at the roster of members, I could see both of them, making a jump for something if the opportunity opens up. What that is, I have no idea. But I think two names to watch there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. And we're back after another break because the camera we bought that is very expensive died. You can't trust anybody these days, especially cameras.
Do you want to go on a tangent about Sony again?
No, I'll let my rant from last time
being that
stand.
we have a Canon,
yes.
In the room with us today.
So, the war of cameras.
Yeah, it's true.
Where does Ashton Kutcher fall on this? Anyway, all right. Back to honorable mentions. We finished up the Republicans there. Now let's talk Democrats.
Also, Bradley, how many calls from folks do you think we're going to get about our takes?
I'm sure we'll get some.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Just remember, people, we're hypothesizing. We're having fun.
That's a word. Yes.
I'm fun.
Yes, this is just guessing.
It totally is a word. Hypothesizing.
Whatever you say.
You had me second guessing my vocabulary, you crazy man.
Come on.
Goodness
all right, who you got?
Democrats. Nathan Johnson, top of the list.
Gosh.
Yeah. Current state senator, and certainly somebody we've seen be able to kind of deal with a Republican-controlled Senate and still maintain support among his base. He had a primary this cycle that we certainly were keeping an eye on against Victoria Niave-Criado, a House member who positioned herself as the more progressive candidate in that race, and he fared well. He's back in the Senate. He'll be just fine. But
yeah, he won pretty easily.
And I think at the top of most folks' list for those in Democratic circles right now who could potentially run for other office. And
who hasn't already, right?
Yes, exactly.
Which brings me to mine, the obvious choice, Beto.
Yeah.
It's obvious. I mean, he's got the national profile. He's got the infrastructure, and he's not let it dissolve. He's still, this year he's doing a voter registration efforts through his, I forget the name of the organization, but it's still running, and he's very much involved. He's just not on the ballot. But he will be again, no doubt, especially because Democrats, particularly compared to Republicans, don't have a bench. And that's been their issue for a while.
Yeah.
It takes time in victories to build a bench. So
And money.
And money, yes. But Beto is, at the moment, the face of Texas Democrats. I'm sure some Democrats hate that. Some love it. But he's still there. And I think there's something in his future. Whether he wins or not, that's a different question. You know, he's run for 3 offices and lost for 3 offices since his congressional days. But, yeah, there's that.
I'm still not over the fact that you did not think hypothesizing was a word. Brad, you write for a living.
Nobody's perfect. In the words of a philosopher named Hannah Montana.
I'm so glad that happened.
Yeah.
That's our cold open.
That's got to be it.
That's got to be it.
Yeah.
Okay, Jasmine Crockett.
And we should say that's the cold open in the cold open.
Great.
Yeah.
So this is the cold open.
Welcome to the cold open.
Oh, brother. Back to Democrats.
Yeah.
Jasmine Crockett, I think, is somebody to keep an eye on. She's the member of Congress representing Texas's 30th congressional district. She replaced the late Eddie Bernice Johnson, who passed away this last December, a former House member, and has definitely had a meteoric rise in terms of what you can expect from Democrats in Texas and their ability to run for office. So she's very fluent in social media. She's young. I think she has a lot to work with. So definitely someone to keep an eye on.
I think, again, you're missing an obvious choice, and that's the Castro brothers.
I'm going deep cuts.
We haven't talked Democrats at all yet.
That's true. You're right. I should have broadened my scope.
I have deep cuts. I'm just also mentioning the obvious.
Well, good. You take care of the obvious.
And so,
I'll do the more politically
okay.
literate choices.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, that's how we're just framing. Gotcha. I lump them in together because I can't tell them apart. I'm just kidding. I can tell them apart. It's just.
You're gonna get yourself in trouble.
It's fine. It's a joke. People have a sense of humor. Good Lord.
They are twins. So.
But I think Julian Castro, sometime last year, tweeted a picture going into the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. He could run for something.
And these are brothers who certainly have not shied away from running for other positions in the past. Right. So.
Right. And obviously, Castro did not jump into this race against Ted Cruz, which is what people kind of thought he was going to do at the time. We have Colin Allred, who I think is another person to watch in this. Obviously.
Yeah, he's on the list.
However, this turns out, which it's no secret to suggest that Democrats have an uphill battle in the state. It's a R56 district. That's not
district.
State, whatever.
You did a great job.
It is not, a battleground right now. Although, if you look at the fourth reading newsletter, there is a scenario in which Democrats can win the state of Texas.
Who writes the fourth reading newsletter? Bradley?
Oh, that's me.
Oh, okay.
Myself and
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I
got it.
In one of the sections, I talk about an astute analysis about electoral voting trends by someone by the name of Fat Ugly Rat. And
or at least whose Twitter handle is Fat Ugly Rat.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he analyzed the 2020 election vote just based on the path of the eclipse that's going through the country. And in Texas, which is a large section of the eclipse path, Joe Biden won by a very slim margin, but he won. So maybe in eclipse world, Texas is battleground. Right now, though, not quite. But I expect Colin Allred, even if he doesn't win, to stay in the mix.
And if we talk about an R56 state, we are referring to the Texas Partisan Index, yes. Our metric for which we determine the partisan political leaning of a district or the state. And
that's based on averages of statewide races.
Over a few cycles.
So there is a method to the madness. We're not just sticking our finger in the wind.
It's true.
Who you got next?
I'm going deep cut again. Eddie Morales, a House member.
I almost put him on mine. Okay.
That I think would be certainly somebody with a profile that could grow. He's a member representing a broad portion of the border. I believe he represents Pancho Narvaez's old district along the Texas-Mexico border. Yeah, I think he's well respected by a lot of his colleagues. He's well spoken. He has a lot to offer. He knows policy, especially border policy, very well. I think he'd be somebody to keep an eye on.
Okay. I'm going to go with Ann Johnson, particularly for
such a good
Attorney
choice.
General.
Yep.
She's a former prosecutor and was one of the faces of impeachment in the General Investigating Committee. She made, I think, opening statements in both the impeachment day and the trial, I believe. I think she definitely has higher ambitions, and especially for Office of the Attorney General.
Very sharp, very skilled orator, former prosecutor, I believe.
I said that. Thank you.
Sorry, Bradley.
Yeah.
I don't listen to all the words you say.
Clearly.
Yeah. Regardless, Ann Johnson's a great pick, and I can't believe I didn't have her on my list.
Yeah.
How many more do you have, Democrats?
I have one more.
Oh, why don't you
Actually,
just...
2 more.
Oh, okay.
3 more.
3 more? Okay.
I can name them real fast if you want.
This is not necessarily a Democrat. This is an independent. Matthew McConaughey. Keep an eye on him. I think we'd be remiss. Brad, you can't miss the big fish.
All right.
Oh, gosh. Holly's going to love that. I think Sarah Eckhart would be an interesting person to keep an eye on as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got Carol Alvarado. Similar vein to Eckhart there, being senators.
Good analysis. They are
Thank
both
you.
senators, yeah.
Veronica Escobar,
Oh, totally.
who holds
Yep.
Beto O'Rourke's old congressional seat. And then, of course, you have Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo. She's been talked about a lot as a future Democratic candidate for statewide office. Even I heard her name mentioned in among those thinking about challenging Abbott in 22. Obviously, Beto took that and ran with it, and she would not have had a shot against Beto, I don't think. But in a world where Beto's not in the mix for running for something, I think she's right up there. She's gotten the glowing profile pieces from national media outlets to back up the at least suggestion that she is among those being considered or among those considering. So, I think, that's what I got.
Solid choice. I like it. Shall we move on to the last bit of our podcast here? We've
We
gone
should.
long. We have a lot to say about
Yes.
this. We
We
could go on
should
for a
shut
long
up
time.
soon, but
And tell us
first-
who we've missed, people. We want to know who y'all think, who we missed.
Let us know where we screwed up really poorly.
In our
'Cause undoubtedly we
hypothetical
did.
draft.
That is not going to come true.
Yeah. We're just having fun.
This is just content. All right.
This is
We're
just content. That's true.
Trying to keep you entertained and scintillated. Are those synonyms or antonyms or
It's okay.
I don't know. I'm just throwing words out there now.
Yeah, because you didn't think hypothesizing was a word.
You're right.
Lord in heaven. You honestly made me second guess myself.
I realized shortly after I said that it was a word.
Yes, it's
and I just
a word.
committed to the bit. Just to make you feel stupid.
Well, you succeeded. Okay, 2027 statewide slate.
And we're going from...
I don't know how this works. How are you envisioning this going?
Well, we can do 2 ways. We can pick from the slates we have here, or we can think what it's actually going to be like. I think we should do the latter.
What it's actually going to be like.
We already picked who our front runners
So
are.
saying, like, if Abbott keeps running for governor, is that what you're saying? Like, we'd include those incumbents that we're ousting in
That'd
this?
be pretty boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I'm confused. I'm confused how this would work otherwise.
Okay, then let's just...
Run through our options of
Go
who we
with the
chose.
same.
Great.
Yeah.
So for governor, you chose.
Well, you're the one...
Okay,
your
for
name
governor,
is right
I
there.
chose Crenshaw.
Yes. I have Middleton. For lieutenant governor,
I said Hagar.
I also have Hager.
I said Middleton for AG.
Okay, I forget who did I say for AG?
Oh, we have comptroller and land commission on this,
Yeah.
which we didn't.
Bush. I thought about it.
Well, good for you. Ag commissioner, I said Gomer.
Oh, that's right. I had Gomer as well. Now it's interesting.
Comptroller, Hancock.
Buckingham.
Nice.
Okay.
Land commissioner.
This I had not thought of.
Who wants it?
We're really struggling here.
Yeah, we are. Hold on. Let me look at committees here and see what we can think of. Because
Let's go Eric Johnson.
for land commissioner, I'm going to say Cecil Bell.
But he's running for... He can't run for 2 offices.
Oh, I see.
He's running for ag commissioner
Okay,
here.
okay. Then Dwayne Burns.
Oh, okay.
He's the chair of land and resource management, so it's kind of just me picking from the pool there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a lot more thought out than mine.
Yeah, Eric Johnson, I do not think will be running for land commissioner anytime soon.
Did you think Don Buckingham would be running for land commissioner anytime soon? I didn't.
True. Fair.
It's not as pigeonholed an office as ag commish, I'd say. So.
Do you think it will drive people crazy that we're saying commish? Or do you think they'll find it endearing?
I'm sure I'm going to get the lot. You wouldn't call your fraternity a frat. Don't call your commissioner a commish.
I don't think that's what you'll get at all.
There's a much worse version of that.
Oh, is that referencing something I'm unaware of?
I think you've probably heard it before, but I'm definitely not repeating it on this.
Yeah, that's good.
So.
Okay. Well, Bradley, this has been fun.
It has been.
Would you like to do the outro as you are the host of this podcast?
What do we say in the outro? I forget.
I don't know, Bradley. It's your outro.
Goodbye. I don't know. How's that?
That's great.
Goodbye.
Tell us where we went wrong. Give us some feedback. If you like us, review us on iTunes. If you don't like us, don't give us a bad review.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about the reviews. Subscribe on YouTube.
If you subscribe to The Texan, you get access to this podcast a day before it comes out on all podcast platforms.
And please do that because that's how I can afford to live
It's how
in the city of Austin.
It's how Winston gets his food and survives.
That's how I get my food and survive.
True, you will give Winston your food.
I'm a bit more important, I would like to think, than a dog.
Yeah. Great.
Catch you next time.